So good afternoon from the Textile Institute in Manchester, UK, and welcome to today's session, day 3 of Tea with a TI, and our final webinar session of the series. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome back as well to those who have joined our earlier sessions this week. Again, for those who have not had the pleasure to meet, I'm Stephanie Dick, the CEO of the Textile Institute. I'd also like to take a moment to thank Taylor & Francis for sponsoring our first webinar series, and we're delighted that Richard Delahunty, Global Portfolio Director from Taylor & Francis, is presenting today. The Institute has a first-class and internationally recognised portfolio of publications, and we've received many inquiries in 2020 in regards to how to publish, what is the process, and we thought that the final day of the webinar series would be the ideal opportunity to share some useful insights with our members. So just a few housekeeping notes to remind everybody, we'll be recording the session today, and the webinar series will be emailed out at the end of the week to you all. The timing of the session today will be approximately an hour. After each presentation, you'll be invited to ask questions. For those familiar with the Zoom setup, please feel free to ask your questions in the Q&A feature on Zoom as the presentations take place. For those that are not familiar with the Zoom setup, you'll find this at the bottom of your screen. The chair of your session will monitor the Q&A throughout the presentation, but if we don't get a chance to answer all your questions, please forward these to the presenters who you'll be happy to respond and engage following the webinar. If you'd like to ask your question in person as well, please indicate this, and Robin Ingham, who's hosting the session, will be able to unmute your mic as well. So I'd now like to introduce Rebecca Unsworth, Executive Director of the Textile Institute, and whom I've had the pleasure of working with for 20 years, actually on Friday. So I'd just like to say happy anniversary to Rebecca, and congratulations as well from all your friends at the TI. After an early career in banking, Rebecca retrained in librarianship. She worked in academic, prison and museum libraries before joining the Textile Institute in 2000 to manage the library and the information service. This role developed to include having responsibility for the professional qualifications and the Institute's publishing. Rebecca is a qualified and chartered librarian and has an MSc in educational research. So over to you, Rebecca. I'm now going to switch off my camera and microphone and hand over to you, and I hope that you all enjoyed today's session.
Well, thank you very much, Stephanie, and welcome all to the final day of our webinar series, Tea with the TI. Today's session is to give you an overview of our publishing, and I'm delighted to be joined by Richard Delahunty from Taylor & Francis, who will be speaking about how to get published, and we have a recorded presentation from Holly Morris on her experience of being a first-time author. We'll take questions at the end of the session, and we also have in the audience editors who will be able to answer your questions. So since 1910, the Institute has published world-leading research, and through its portfolio of journals, books and periodicals, researchers and practitioners are able to reach a global audience. By working with leading publishers as partners, the Institute is able to expand its range of titles to fully represent the Institute's diverse membership. So this is our flagship publication, first published in 1910. The Journal of the Textile Institute welcomes papers concerning research and innovation, reflecting the professional interests of the Textile Institute in science, engineering, economics, management and design. Papers may encompass anything in the range of textile activities, from fibre production through textile processes and machines to the design, marketing and use of products. Papers may also report fundamental, theoretical or experimental investigations. First, Textile Progress provides critical reviews for recent research on textiles and has been doing so since 1969. Each issue of Textile Progress is devoted to just one topic, selected because it attracts significant research interest. The aim is to help the reader to achieve understanding of the state of the art in relation to research in that particular field at the time of publication. Textile Progress are drawn from prestigious textile research and development institutions across the world. This is a journal that we co-badge with Taylor and Francis, and it's the International Journal of Fashion Design, Technology and Education, although we affectionately call it the Pink Journal in the office. And it aims to provide high quality, peer-reviewed forum for research in fashion design, pattern cutting, apparel production, manufacturing technology and fashion education. The journal encourages interdisciplinary research and the development of an academic community which will share newly developed technology, theory and techniques in the fashion and textile industries, as well as promote the development of excellent education practice in the clothing and textile fields. So that's our journal portfolio. This is our membership magazine, Textiles, which all of you should have seen, and if you haven't, then do contact us because this is part of your membership package. And the magazine covers all aspects of textiles, news and in-depth articles encompassing all areas of the complete supply chain, from fibre production through knit, weave and non-wovens to fashion, architecture, footwear, medical and automotive products, and provides business and production perspectives. This is one of our flagship book series published with Elsevier. The Textile Institute book series is a world-leading collection of books in the fields of fibre technology and properties, textile manufacturing and process technology, and technical textiles. The series includes research-based monographs and text reference titles, providing detailed coverage of advanced topics and in-depth reviews of new and developing technologies. One of our newer book series is the Textile Institute Professional Publications, which was developed to support textile professionals in their work and to help emerging professionals by providing the information needed to gain a sound understanding of key topics relating to a range of textile subjects. The Textile Institute series, Responsibility and Sustainability with Greenleaf, focuses on the promotion of sustainability, social responsibility and corporate governance, and aims to support building a market for responsible textiles and apparel, focusing on how the sectors reflect changes in market requirements and satisfy consumer demand. Textile Terms and Definitions, or TT&D, is published by the Textile Institute since 1954 and is generally regarded as the established, most authoritative and comprehensive English language reference manual of textile terminology. It's now a unique website which enables the user to access the latest and most up-to-date definitions available and widely used in courts of law, litigation. And coming soon, I'm happy to announce a new series with the Textile Institute and Bloomsbury. We're in discussions to launch a new joint book series, which will cover clothing design, fashion design, footwear design for undergraduate students and emerging professionals. Publishing is open to all of the textile community, so please share all this with your friends and colleagues. And if you're interested in contributing as an author, an editor or reviewer, then contact me directly at the email below. So if you're wondering how to go about getting published, this next presentation is for you. It's my pleasure to introduce Richard Delahunty. Richard is Global Portfolio Director for Physical Sciences and Engineering at Taylor & Francis and manages a global team overseeing the strategic direction of the journal portfolio. He has worked with academic communities across science, technology, social sciences and humanities at Routledge. including leading learned societies for over 22 years. He started his publishing career at Cambridge University Press and editorial career at Manchester University Press. He's been with Taylor & Francis for 17 years and is particularly interested in disruptive innovation, that sounds fascinating, scholarly research workflows, knowledge transfer, and learned society publishing. So I'd like now to hand over to you, Richard, for your presentation, Publishing in Academic Journals.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. I'm delighted to be here. Let me share my screen. And I was reminded of the importance of plurality when I was looking at your presentation. What an impressive publishing output there is to see there. And the Bloomsbury one sounds extremely exciting. As well as the wonderful journals publishing program as well, which you have. And so I will kick off with a big thank you to you, to Stephanie, and to Robin for inviting me here. I'm going to offer some best practice advice, particularly on the research publishing part, with a kind of, well, my first thought is to just say, there is such a large amount of research, and journals are very much open for business. Sometimes they're regarded as quite procedural, in that sometimes people have to publish in a journal, but actually I'm responsible for about 400 journals, research journals, and the journals, like the ones published by the Textile Institute, are the most exciting, because not only are you publishing cutting edge, kind of very cool subjects across traditional academic disciplines. Yeah, you're disruptive innovators, absolutely. You're also publishing really timely research in growing areas, really exciting areas too. So it is my pleasure to be a part of that really thriving research and publishing output from the TI. So I'm going to give a quick overview of the publishing landscape, which just really kind of presents a dizzying picture of how much research output there is in the world. And we'll very shortly see how textiles features in that. So as you can see here, there's 10,000 publishers in the world, 33,000 active English language peer-reviewed journals. I probably don't need to say too much about the peer review process, except to say it is not a barrier to publishing your research. It is an important part of getting your research into shape. And anyone here, I know there's a mix in the audience, but anyone who's not published for the first time in a scholarly journal and is thinking of the step, anyone who doesn't need to because you're a professional, you're working in a job, I'm hoping to break down some of the perceived barriers today, just to say that peer review is a big part of a healthy publishing ecosystem. So there's a lot more research being published, over 3 million articles a year, with a huge amount of people doing work that's driven by research and development, and that is thriving. Only 20% are repeat authors, it's important to say. So many people are publishing their soul work, their life's work. As you can see in textiles, globally, there is a very, very active output here, and the projected numbers of articles. And I think this includes everything. So this includes patents, this includes data sets. There's a broad sweep of types of output here, but it demonstrates, I think we're at 86,704 as of yesterday when I checked. There's a huge amount of output globally and growing. So there's an almost doubling there, or there is a doubling since 2012. So it's a huge amount. So let's get started on choosing a journal. So before you begin investigating possible options to publish, and there are two excellent journals displayed on screen right there, I think the first thing to say is it's best to spend time understanding the audience you want to reach, and that depends often on your setting. So people often focus on their research article, the core of their research, but obviously you may publish a review article, a systematic review, a position piece, editorial, case study, book review, so many more. I think last time I checked, there are at least 24 content types, and they're growing, and form is changing. Short form is an important part too. So your work is going to be written for specialists. It also may involve public scholarship, so you may be writing for public good. So novelty and pushing forward the discussion is an extremely important part of it. Key considerations you'll see on screen here: scope, impact in all its forms, many different types. There's formal academic citation impact that you may think of, but also, as I hinted earlier, publishing impact. Publishing models becoming increasingly important too. Open access is part of that, and many people indeed have a requirement based on their setting to publish open access. Typically, articles receive substantially more citations if citations are important to you, and greater readership. So 6 times as many downloads for your piece if you publish it open access. Many countries, many regions, many institutions have open access as a requirement or strong encouragement. So this slide in your journey of deciding where to submit is about thinking like an editor. And it's probably an empathy point that we're articulating here in this slide for you. You're trying to think about the feedback loop, the mechanism of peer review that is working for a journal. So how many does an editor receive per day, per week of a paper, of the type of paper that you're submitting? How do I get attention? Well, novelty is obviously an important part of that, but there are some technical points too, and some practical points about getting everything submitted in a tidy fashion, adhering to the aims and scope, in adhering to the instructions for authors, knowing what the right title is, knowing how to write the right abstract. There's some simple guidelines here that I think are a really good rule of thumb. Pretty much common sense, a lot of these things, but it's surprising how often these things get neglected on the submission path. Write first, edit later, of course, an important rule of thumb. Express those complicated ideas plainly. An editor can receive so many submissions, 50 a year to tens of thousands a year, although those tens of thousands are rare, and a well-structured article with a good method section, stating a hypothesis clearly, articulating an argument in simple language well, demonstrating results, drawing on current literature, and not omitting anything that is glaringly obvious that may get spotted by reviewers. Really important things. And title, keywords, abstract are very important, as we'll come to later on. Very important in terms of getting visibility. And a nice note there about telling a story. It needs to be consistent and easy to follow. Titling, as I hinted, short and to the point with specific keywords, avoiding redundancy or cliche. Of course, in our research training, we are taught to kind of look for the novelty, and of course the research should be novel, but think about what you would type into a search engine as a really important point. What keywords would you use in order to discover an article on this topic? Think about your intended audience. What are the natural keywords and phrases? Also, when you're writing an abstract, when you're writing the paper, word counts, and think about the language and about, in a sense, de-jargoning. We've all got our important jargon, but also think about the lay reader too, as they're an important constituency, particularly with textile research, of course. Keywords, Choose synonyms, so thinking of the search engine point, as I said earlier. Anything relevant to methods or technique, as well as your main argument and your main results, and test your keywords before submitting. And also, a final point before we move on to the ethics slide, I clicked a little too fast there. Make sure you are, as part of your process, sanity checking and getting others to read. And that they are familiar with the journal and you're familiar with the journal as well that you're submitting to, because if it's your first time, you may well get it wrong. Publication ethics. So I think there's a lot of ethics cases that we see. They may be on the rise. Difficult to prove that across the industry, or possibly publishers and universities and research integrity departments have got better at identifying breaches. These examples on screen are very familiar, and I'm sure we could discuss them at length, and happy to take questions on things like that. But be aware of these issues. So a quick checklist here on screen. Before you submit, a few important steps. Knowingly establish work, match the aims and scope, check your bibliography, follow the instructions for authors, be aware of formatting, and there are many proofing and language polishing services out there, some of them paid for. And so if you have a budget that can allow for that, I would suggest thinking of using them. If not, a good colleague who you owe a favor to might well be able to help, because it will pay off in terms of the effort put into the process in assessing your article, and presentation does count there. Just I have lots of slides on this, but I've distilled it to one. You are likely to be using a submission system, often a perceived barrier, simply because they have to take account of many content types and a lot of different things. You'll be using a submission system. The important point for me is that you have enough training and you know how to submit. There's a submission button on most journal websites, including the Textile Institute's journals, and you click the button and you go through the process, and the training should be there to support you as a submitting author. And we're all there to help. So all the publishing team as well are here to help your submission journey. All the files, figures, tables, and data on that submission journey should be done. Think, check, and submit. If you Google those 3 words, you'll see a wonderful project that one of my colleagues invented many years ago, which is about publishing ethics and about getting the submission right first time. If you're the lead author, make sure you take responsibility for identifying all of that information and making sure your co-authors, their names are spelled correctly, all of the detail, the fine detail, their affiliations, their ORCID IDs, their unique identifiers, anything that might need to be supplied, including their consent to publish and consent to corrections further down the line, is obtained. And you're submitting the correct version, which is a useful reminder on the end of that slide. And then once it's submitted, all these people are involved in assessing. So every journal will have its own peer review process. The reviewers assess the detail, they give advice and expertise. There will be specialists and they will be selected to assess the quality and viability, the validity and novelty of the research and the soundness of the research that you have submitted. The editor's decision is usually final, and after acceptance, that is almost a legally acceptable point at which you know you're going to get published. Articles flow online, and it is a seamless process. Check your proofs promptly is all I would say as a publisher. If the comments are negative, it's surprising how many people get really upset at this part of the process, and some disheartened referee responses to referees' comments often hold up the process. So obviously the scientific process is what it is, and people are used to getting feedback. Sometimes it doesn't always land well, and sometimes reviewers often don't make those points constructively. So there's obviously a role to play in getting reviewers to review consistently. And don't be afraid to push back on some of those amendments as well on that side. Reviewing your response to your editor is extremely important as part of this, and making sure that you, even if you disagree and you are pushing back on that feedback, that you do so constructively and with a sense of pace at which you want to move. So if you want to publish promptly, then it's in your interest to respond promptly to those reviewer comments, because a revise and resubmit can often be left hanging, and that doesn't benefit anyone. And I won't read through these, but there's a lot of reasons for rejection, and this is a top 10 because it's convenient to say top 10. There's many more than this, of course, but they are very common reasons for rejection that get reported to us frequently. But if you get a big tick and your article's accepted, some tips there. To keep a copy of the accepted manuscript, you may be required to post it by your employer or your academic institution. And it's useful because you are often the best marketer for your work. You can then link to that. You can put it in your email signature, put it on your personal website. You can tweet it, you can brag about it, you can retweet the publisher's tweet. We market every article. We've got automated and otherwise marketing. So pretty much, well, everything does get marketed in one way or another. And we have a marketing team to help you with your promotion too. It's not just books that get promotion, articles do too. And of course, there are sharing initiatives in the industry, and there's not enough time to go into that now, but there's initiatives for you to share on social media your work effectively. And I would encourage you, if you've got other publications and it's relevant to site, that's always another promotion tool too. So that was a very, perhaps I'm over time. No, I'm all good. Thank you. And I'm happy to take questions at the appropriate time, and also to go in a lot deeper on any of these topics at a later date. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. That was a really interesting presentation. So we'll take questions at the end, but I just also wanted to give a bit of information about another way that we promote our publications, in that the TI has its own publications Twitter feed, which is at TI Publications, and all the papers that we produce are all on there. So all new papers go straight onto our TI Publications. So do give us a follow on that Twitter feed, because we do work very hard to put that together. So I'm now going to introduce our next presenter, Holly Morris. Unfortunately, Holly cannot be here with us today. As a busy surgical registrar, at the time of inviting her to speak, she did not have a rota. Nevertheless, she was keen to participate, so has pre-recorded her presentation. As a chartered member of the Textile Institute, Holly's passion lies in the interaction between healthcare and smart textiles with the human body. In particular, how nanotechnology and sensors can be utilised in medical devices whilst maintaining patient safety as a priority. Holly has particular interest in the use of sustainable materials within the technical textile sector, and works closely with both academia and industry in the development of medical devices. Co-author of a review of the medical textile sector in Textile Progress, she has also experience in teaching and supervising both undergraduate and postgraduate students. So I really hope you all enjoy this presentation. It is very, very interesting. So thank you.
Good evening. So it's a pleasure to be here presenting. It's always a pleasure to be presenting whenever the Textile Institute asks me to. And today I've been asked to talk about my experiences publishing in Textile Progress and whether I would do it again. I think that's what the cryptic email was suggesting. So firstly, can I apologise in advance for not being present? I work off. It's a little bit chaotic with the pandemic. So instead, you have my home study in my Saturday civvies whilst the weather is pretty abysmal outside. So my publication was published online about 4 weeks ago. We've had over 500 views so far, so we're rapidly heading towards one of the top 30 publications for the journal. And it really was an experience. So my background is primarily that I'm a doctor, and I'm training in the East Midlands, just nearing the end of higher surgical training. And I have an interest that I've developed over the past 5 years in the technical textile sector, primarily in the medical textile sector, but with a little bit of interest in smart textiles as well. So when I was asked whether I would write a review of this subject and the area, I have to say, if I'm completely honest, that I did go away and sleep on the idea for a while before I agreed. And that was partly because it is a huge task. And it's not just a review, because actually we are defining an entire subspecialty area of the textile industry. Nevertheless, I did accept, and I accepted for several reasons. So firstly, the last review of the medical textile sector was released in 2009, and it's now over a decade old. And in that decade, there's been significant advances in technology, in nanotechnology, but also in our understanding within the healthcare system of how the body works, what we need to do, what's appropriate in terms of design and implementation of medical devices. From that point of view, it seemed very timely to write a review on the area. The smart textile sector has advanced dramatically, and I'm involved in a project where we have one garment going through to clinical trials in a world-renowned centre. And so again, it seems very timely to start documenting some of the advances so that we can assist others developing credible medical devices using some of this new technology. It also allows me to discuss some of the problems that we're currently facing as healthcare professionals. Secondly, and one of the main reasons, is that actually this is an overarching reference document that's useful not only to academia who will be designing and thinking, but also to industry who might be manufacturing, and then into the health system where we'll be doing clinical trials before giving any CE markings and the like. And actually, if you want to drive credible research, you do have to define what the problem is and where we see it going, and that's critically important. Another reason to write was that actually many of the standards that we have in the industry are now obsolete or out of date. That's not through anybody's fault, that's just the nature of the development and the rapid progression within the field. However, I was granted, in effect, the ability to start documenting where I saw standards going and what we needed to be centering our attention to. And it's not just in textiles, it's in the smart textiles, and it's also with the artificial intelligence that we're seeing coming through in healthcare now. I also knew that writing this document would teach me a lot and that I would learn a lot. I certainly wasn't wrong there, because some of the knowledge I used, I haven't really required in my specific area since I was a junior doctor. So it was quite fun and quite exciting to see how things had advanced in other areas of medicine, to talk to my colleagues who work in those fields and see what their problems were, what was pertinent to them. And to be fair, the collaboration is good fun, and it's lovely to catch up with old friends, to meet new colleagues, new friends. So I think one of the main things is, what support did I have from the Textile Institute and in terms of the actual publication itself? So like a cat falling on their feet, I was very fortunate that my co-author is the head of publications of the Textile Institute. So not only did I have somebody with a wealth of knowledge and expertise in the technical textile field, but I also had somebody who has years of experience in publishing and in being editor of some of the main journals within the field. So Professor Murray's expertise was absolutely invaluable. He kept me amused. We only had one episode where we had slightly crossed words based on referencing, but that quickly blew over and we continued. To be fair, it was brilliant to draw on the expertise. And so would I do the whole process again? Well, yes, I would. Obviously, this doesn't need recapping for another several years at least. But yes, I would. And I would update areas as required. The whole process took around 18 months, and the first 12 months of that was in writing various sections. After that, I sent it to various colleagues to be scrutinised, and from that I then had to update references, or they amended paragraphs for me. We had to get permission for images, and once we had got the bulk of the document, it then goes off for a formal peer review process. So we were fortunate that we had an international peer reviewer who's an expert in textiles and based in academia. and they offered incredibly important advice in terms of what needed further clarification, what also we should be including. And once we had addressed the comments from the reviewer, it then goes forward to the publishers, and you get into the technicalities of publishing and typesetting. So after it's typeset, a copy comes back. I have to check that the images are correct, that my headings are in the correct format, and that the typesetters have understood what I'm trying to explain. So from my point of view, I enjoyed the whole experience. It was a new experience and I learned a lot. I gained a lot of networking potential for the future, and I gained vast information on medical devices and the regulation side of this. A personal vendetta for me is that I have a huge interest in the sustainability of products in healthcare. I really believe that we should be moving away from these single-use disposable products that we see, and that we should be designing sustainable products that can be recycled and reused and sterilised. Writing this review allowed me to document some of those thoughts, and it's done in an incredible way in what would be in a respected medium to then alter policies from. The issue is that I can't change the entirety of healthcare as a solo clinician, but what I can do is collaborate with others to help design and implement new products that fit these requirements. And as a group of experts within the field, actually you can start changing policies and have an effect on a national and an international level. Now that we've got documented problems of microplastics in the oceans, and also we've now got the PPE burden from the disposable PPE, it seems an incredibly timely position to be doing this from. And so I leave you with that thought that actually we have a vast base of knowledge and expertise internationally within this sector and within healthcare, and there are open-minded people who do believe that we should be driving towards a more environmentally sustainable healthcare system. So I think to summarise, if any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them by email. I can only apologise again that I'm not here in person. I would thoroughly recommend the process, and the journal as a whole is very interesting, particularly with some of the areas that it's published on, which are very far away from my area of healthcare textiles. In the meantime, please do stay safe, continue to isolate and socially distance yourselves. It does make a difference. We are seeing the difference in admissions behind hospital doors. And so I'll leave you back with the Textile Institute. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Holly. A very different perspective and a very interesting presentation. Holly obviously wasn't put off by writing her textile progress because she's now in the process of writing a book for us, so we didn't completely scare her away. Now I noticed that we have got some questions down here, but first I would like to thank both Richard and Holly for their presentations. And Richard, if you could come back on, because this question is for you. And actually, I had a question, and the question that's come from the audience are quite similar. So my question was, we'll have members of the audience and the extended audience when this goes out to our membership. And they may wish to become reviewers. Now, you mentioned the review process in your paper. So what makes a good reviewer? And then Professor Rajendran has also asked a question, and he said, sometimes hunting experienced reviewers is challenging for editors, and hence they choose inexperienced reviewers. How their comments impact on the quality of the submitted paper. So could you talk a little bit more about how to become a reviewer and how to become a good reviewer?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So on the what makes a good reviewer point, so I'd say probably two things. Awareness of biases is one thing. So aiming for as unbiased a judgment as possible, and a kind of honesty in relation to that. So at the point where you are asked to be a reviewer, understanding the nature of the content and how it is going to naturally fit with your own specialist interest. And rather than stretching every sinew to kind of say, yes, I really want to be the reviewer, I'll do it, knowing whether this is in your wheelhouse and field of expertise or not. So I think that's the first thing, being aware of how your bias is, but also aware of your strengths in relation to the article that you're thinking of reviewing. Second thing I would say is timeliness. So timeliness of responding, and there is a lot of pressure on you once you say yes to reviewing an article, because those system reminders, because often it is an auto-generated reminder that will come to you, will start to apply pressure. You may not be able to get the review done to that time frame, and you may heap lots of pressure on yourself. So if you can't review, just be honest and be quick about being honest, because often an editor is waiting on the other end of the line, thinking that you may well say yes, but you may be thinking no, just haven't got around to answering yet. So I think that's probably it. But obviously there's reviewer guidelines in every journal, and following those guidelines is really important. And there's a whole series of kind of traps you can fall into by putting your personal opinions and your own biases in there. And of course there are unconscious biases, and that, you know, a lot of people in their professional and organizational setting are going through unconscious bias training more and more. So those things are working their way through our kind of our modern world, I would say, in a very positive way. But the more you're aware of your own biases, the better, I would say, in the process, just to hammer that point home. And using the guidelines. To the second question about peer reviewer selection, I've written down 3 things here. So the first thing is, when it comes to selection, for years I've been addressing the point about selection bias and how that impacts on journal publishing. And so there are obviously tools to help kind of take out selection bias. There are kind of databases that are in these submission systems that enable you to select reviewers. Not many editors say that they're any good, but they're improving. And there's now people help from publishers. So many of our journals are now have PhDs in relevant topics that can help. At the click of a button, the editor can request that help to find reviewers if their own immediate circle there's no one to do those reviews. But the system, the whole academic publishing system, is changing to embrace new forms of peer review, and open peer review, while and open invited are different forms of peer review, which bring their own problems, in that some people might not want to reveal their own career status, their own name, their own credentials as part of that. So solves some problems and creates others. But I think plurality, again, I'm using that word, is really important here. Let many things flourish, and then new we can try and perfect the system, because it is always reported as an imperfect system. Review rewards, really important. So that's the second thing. And the more you recognize and thank reviewers, the better. But there are formal credit systems. There's a system called Project Credit out there, which starts putting some structure around credit for people who are involved in every part of the publishing process. So if you're a more junior person who's helped with a data set or helped do some interviews, all that kind of stuff, you can get formally recognized. Authorship not being the only way of getting recognized anymore in the publishing process. Finally, the guidelines need to be very strict on reviewers identifying novelty and soundness in the paper. So inexperienced peer reviewers should be following those restrictions, and publishers, many stakeholders, institutions are now putting in formal training, peer review training, because it's a fundamental part of grant applications, of publishing, and indeed we as publishers do peer review training too. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Richard. That was interesting. Professor Registrar, and I hope that answered your question. I've just got a quick one. It probably isn't a quick answer really, but as quickly as you can you see a time when you only offer open access as a publishing option?
Not really. No, it's one business model. And we embrace it, we love it, but we love other forms as well. I think it's an evolving model.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you so much. So if there's no other questions from the floor, I'd like to thank both of our speakers for their most interesting presentations. And thank you again, Richard and Taylor and Francis, for sponsoring this 3-day webinar series. So finally, I would like to take this opportunity to wish you all a safe holiday season, and we look forward with renewed optimism to meeting again in 2021. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks very much.
Oh, thank you, Rebecca, for chairing day 3 of Tea with the TI, and thank you to the presenters and sponsors, Richard from Taylor and Francis, and Holly Morris, who sadly could not be with us, but it was great to have that video sent through. And as Rebecca mentioned, if you have questions later on, please do send those to Robin Ingham, and she'll make sure that they're passed through to Holly and to Richard and Rebecca as well. As I've mentioned at the end of each webinar, we're really keen to receive your feedback about the webinars themselves, and to hear what topics from across the industry members would like to hear about. I think having Holly here today as well kind of represents the true and vast scope of the Textile Institute membership. So it was great to represent that today. We're planning for the next webinar to take place in February 2021. So please email Robin who you've met during the registration process, and let us know your thoughts about what you'd like to hear about next year. Thank you for joining us today, and I'd like to wish you all a happy and healthy new year. A particular thank you to all our members worldwide who have been so supportive in 2020. It's been wonderful to have had the opportunity to speak with so many of you this year and help you with your inquiries and your activities and events which have been taking place throughout the pandemic. And please do not hesitate to keep that communication with us in 2021. We do so enjoy hearing from you. So I'd like to wish you all a good evening and a good day again, depending on where you are in the world. And thank you for your time.
I just have one last quick one. Today's Stephanie's birthday, so can we all wish Stephanie a very happy birthday? I'm sure this has been a very memorable one for you, and a very unusual birthday with the situation that's going on and affecting us all, but happy birthday from all of us.
Thank you very much, and it's been a highlight today as well, I can promise you.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.